If I asked you what company or case you think had the most to do with the start of the modern ESG movement, what would you say? Well, maybe you'd say it was a company like Tesla that's revolutionizing an industry and driving a major shift towards more sustainable industry models. Or perhaps you'd say maybe a huge investment firm like BlackRock that increasingly is using their financial clout to drive certain social and environmental change. Now, all of these would be good guesses, and really there's no way to come up with a conclusive answer. But if I had to pick one, the company I generally think of was one of the most valuable companies in the world as measured by market capitalization in the early 2000s. In fact, they had the second highest market capitalization in the world back then, but declared bankruptcy in December 2001 after their fraudulent practices became public knowledge. Any guesses? Well, if you said Enron, give yourself a pat on the back because that's the one I was thinking of. Now, a lot of you may be familiar with Enron already. In this video, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to the company and the case that profoundly shaped the rise of the ESG movement. So let's get started. Enron was founded in 1985 by Ken Lay through the merger of two natural gas transmission companies. And by 1992, Enron was the largest seller of natural gas in North America. Eventually, Enron owned and operated a variety of assets including gas pipelines, electricity plants, paper plants, water plants, and broadband services across the globe. But the biggest development for the company occurred in the early 1990s when founder Ken Lay brought in Jeff Skilling, a consultant from McKinsey & Company, to help Enron diversify its operations and business strategy. Skilling proposed the creation of essentially a natural gas bank that would buy gas from suppliers and then sell it to consumers, thus guaranteeing both supply and price while charging transaction fees and assuming associated risks. Together, Lay and Skilling created Enron Finance Corp, with Skilling appointed to lead it. Now, under Skilling's direction, Enron quickly dominated the natural gas contract market, leveraging its extensive supplier and customer network to generate substantial profits. Now, he transformed the company culture, emphasizing aggressive trading and recruiting top talent from leading MBA programs. Now, from 1996 to 2000, Enron's revenue skyrocketed from just over 13 billion USD per year to over 100 billion, averaging over 65% annual growth. Now, this was unprecedented in the energy sector. Now, Enron was really the beneficiary of a confluence of circumstances because their creation of some online services and products coincided perfectly with the rise of the internet and a booming IPO market for tech companies. As a result, Enron's stock price shot up, peaking in August 2000 of just over 90 USD per share. And Enron was widely regarded as one of the most innovative companies globally. Fortune magazine even named Enron one of the, quote, 10 stocks to last the decade. But the dot-com bubble burst in 2000, severely impacting Enron's stock price. In September of that year, the Wall Street Journal highlighted the widespread use of what's called mark-to-market accounting in the energy industry, raising eyebrows. And to be honest, this part's a little complicated, but essentially, Enron employed mark-to-market accounting since the mid-1990s. This dubious accounting practice allowed the company to report unrealized future gains as current profits. This practice helped to make it possible for Enron to make substantial investments across more than 40 countries, acquiring and developing power plants and other assets, which led to short-term cash flow issues. And in 2001, journalist Bethany McLean published an article questioning Enron's inflated stock price and the complexity of its financial statements. Her investigation revealed, quote, strange transactions and, quote, erratic cash flow and huge debt, contradicting the company's public image. But unbeknownst to people outside of Enron's top leadership, in order to maintain the appearance of stability and support its stock price, Enron used companies called special purpose entities to offload troubled assets. Basically, they created holding companies and then dumped Enron's debt into them, which served the dual purpose of both inflating Enron's profits and concealing its liabilities. What's worse, Arthur Andersen, one of the big five accounting firms at the time, enabled these practices. Andersen conducted audits and issued reports asserting that Enron's financial statements were fair and true, despite being aware of questionable accounting practices. Now, as happens in so many large-scale scandals like this, senior executives inside Enron ignored warning signs, and dissent was often silenced. On August 14, 2001, founder Ken Lay assured investors that there were no accounting issues. Meanwhile, Sharon Watkins, a former Arthur Andersen accountant and Enron vice president, expressed her concerns in a letter to Lay, warning that the company might implode under the weight of its accounting scandals. Despite her efforts, no significant corrective actions were taken. So on October 16, 2001, Enron announced it needed to restate its financials all the way from 1997 to 2000, leading the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission to launch an investigation into Enron's opaque transactions. By late November 2001, Enron's credit rating was downgraded to junk status, and its stock had plummeted from a high of over 90 USD per share to just 61 cents per share. On October 2, 2001, Enron filed for bankruptcy, which was the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history at the time. Now, the fallout was devastating. Over 4,500 employees lost their jobs, and investors lost billions. Skilling, Lay, and one of their partners named Andy Fastow were convicted of multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. In January 2002, Arthur Andersen was also found guilty of obstruction of justice for shredding documents related to its audit of Enron, leading to the loss of its CPA license and the eventual shutdown of the firm. Now, the Enron scandal, which is still considered one of the largest, most shocking, and influential corporate scandals of all time, highlighted severe failures in corporate governance and ethics, prompting a public outcry for greater transparency and accountability. Okay, so then why would I say that this case possibly had the most to do with the start of the ESG movement? Well, that's because in response to these scandals and the downfall of both Enron, which again was one of the most valuable companies in the world, as well as Arthur Andersen, which was one of the 5 largest accounting firms in the world, the United States Congress passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. Now, this law established new guidelines for corporate governance, risk management, auditing, and financial reporting to deter and punish corporate accounting fraud. Now, this law demanded an increased focus on transparency, accountability, and corporate responsibility, with the goal of improving corporate governance, financial reporting, and accountability. It did this by imposing stricter regulations on publicly traded companies, requiring them to disclose financial information accurately and transparently to protect investors and to rebuild trust in financial markets. Now, Sarbanes-Oxley also requires that companies disclose whether they have adopted a code of ethics for their senior financial officers and top financial executives. So if a company had not adopted a code of ethics, they had to explain why so that the public could understand. Now, this type of public disclosure requirement, which doesn't necessarily mandate exactly what a company must do, but instead merely requires them to provide disclosures and explain to the public why they are or are not willing to engage in certain activities, has become a core component to a lot of ESG-related regulation and disclosures around the world. Now, additionally, Sarbanes-Oxley includes provisions to protect whistleblowers who report violations of securities laws, fraud, or other misconduct. Now, under this law, companies are required to disclose information about their whistleblower policies and procedures to ensure employees can report unethical behavior without fear of retaliation. Now, this too has been adopted by many countries and creates incentives for insiders within companies to let the respective governments know if the company is engaged in illegal or unethical activities. So in many ways, much of the modern ESG movement is really a further extension of these principles. And as we know, investors are increasingly looking beyond financial performance to evaluate companies based on their impact on the environment, society, and corporate governance practices. So the link between Sarbanes-Oxley and the ESG movement can be seen in the broader context of corporate responsibility and transparency. Both initiatives promote greater accountability, disclosure, and ethical behavior in the corporate world, albeit from slightly different perspectives. So Starbucks is from the financial and governance standpoint, and ESG is from a broader sustainability and social impact perspective. Now, companies that adhere to principles of Sarbanes-Oxley are often better positioned to address ESG concerns and to demonstrate a commitment to responsible business practices. So while many of you may have heard of this story already of Enron, we thought it would be helpful to share it here to provide some perspective and some context. As businesses pursue sustainability, ethical leadership, and responsible governance, it's vital to learn from the past. So throughout this learning journey, we're going to continue to delve into these important themes.